Hey guys, I'm back. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I turned my rusty entranceway of my bus into this masterpiece. Now this project took me all summer because I am the slowest builder on the planet. So buckle up, it's going to be a good one. Watch as I transform my stairwell from this to this. The bottom step was completely rotten and dangerous to step on. Years of driving on salted winter roads completely destroyed the metal and it needed replacement. First thing I had to do was cut out all the rotten metal. Well, this is where I'm at. I've cut half of that step out because it's all rusted. I've cut into this corner. They rot in the corners because underneath salt and water gets between this lip and the floor piece and then just rots. And that's why this centerpiece, which I removed, is so rotten. Because water gets under there and then rots it out. And then this piece is looking a little jank. So I cut it out. We're gonna take this square stock and replace this piece of rotten out hat channel. It's cut the length. So Cole's gonna weld it in. So we're gonna add this piece of angle iron.
As long as it's flush, eh?
Yeah, as long as it's flushed. So this is going to give us a little bit more surface area. The original piece had a piece of hat channel that was underneath the sheet metal to give it more rigidity, but we're just going to add this instead. As a replacement, I took a piece of spare 16 gauge galvanized steel that I had left over from when I removed the stock windows of the bus. I used my metal bender to create a nice lip to the step, and with Cole's help, we welded this piece in place. Months had gone by with a step like this, just raw galvanized steel as the bottom step, which was okay, but it was a bit dangerous. The bottom step was slippery. Natalie from Jimmy Natalie actually slipped on the bottom step on our adventures.
All right, I'm fine.
And I knew I had to do something. I ended up putting grip tape on the bottom step to give more traction so people wouldn't hurt themselves when entering or exiting the bus. While traveling with Jimmy and Natalie, I brought a lot of things with me to keep me occupied. And one of the things was my floor. I ended up installing my floor at Lake Superior Provincial Park while we were hanging out for a couple days. Now I can go on a whole side tangent about how I don't like the quality of the flooring that I picked, and I ended up actually having to redo the flooring because it started to break apart after only a couple months of usage. Now I half attribute this to not locking down the floor, but the quality of the materials that this flooring is made out of is clearly a fault. I redid the floors off camera. The newly installed pieces were locked down and they still have broken apart. So I've kind of given up at this point. So we're just going to finish the flooring. The only way to finish the flooring is to finish the stairwell. Now, this is a Four Seasons bus. We got spray insulation everywhere, about 2 inches on the walls and 1.5 inches on the floor. And so everything's nice and toasty in here, but the step well is an ice box. I plan on putting 1.5 inches of rigid board insulation on all the sides, except for the bottom step, because the bottom step has to stay thin to clear the door mechanism. Another reason I want to get the stairwell done right now is because I can't continue working on the floor. I've gotten up to here, but I want to carry the floor over the added thickness. And so this needs to be done first before I can continue, and then I'll be able to finish this area in. And I have to finish the floor before I can do a little bench area. So I'm bottlenecked by the stairwell, which is kind of silly. I need to remove all of this nice material. Okay, so the step is now prepped. I've cleaned it up as best I can. I primed any exposed metal. For materials, I'm using 1x2 lumber for the frame and this pink rigid foam board for insulation. The foam board that I'm using has lots of compressive strength and actually doesn't require a frame. The frame's only purpose is to securely mount the plywood that's going on top. So all three sides, 1, 2, 3 sides are insulated, and now we have one side of plywood on. I'm gonna do plywood on these sides and then frame out the steps, then insulate, and then layer them. When I did my subfloor, I framed the whole thing with 2x4s. like an idiot, which was totally not necessary and actually problematic. Thanks to Chuck Cassidy, I've learned the wrong in my ways. Wood has very little R value. The more framing you have, the less insulation you have. That's why I'm using minimal framing for the stairwell. Now, there may be a way of insulating the stairwell without framing, but I'm not smart enough to figure that out. And up there's Jerry, working on a solar. This is the first time I'm doing a lot of this stuff, and I don't always know when I'm making a mistake. When you're creating content for YouTube, your mistakes become solidified. I've been thinking about making a video calling out my own work and letting you guys know what I've done wrong so you don't follow. If you're interested in a video like that, let me know in the comments below.
And here's the final result of the frame. I actually managed to do this with no screws into the metal at all. I was going to put one here. I didn't end up doing it. I put a toenail, I put a screw in here. You gotta be very careful when using this kind of thin material because it wants to split. And you can see that here. Even though I pre-drilled and I used this little inset bit, it's still split a bit, so you really got to be careful and you got to do these things or it's going to break apart. So I ended up screwing it to the sides, the back, and then the front attached to these. And then these give it strength, especially this middle one gives it strength so when people land their foot on it, it doesn't break the screws. So yeah, that's how it's framed, how it's screwed. And now I'm going to put the insulation in and then cut pieces of plywood.
To complete the look of the stairwell, I'm going to tile the back and sides, and I'm going to be using flooring for the bottom step. So I'm going to use this kind of tile for the back and this kind of tile for the sides. I have just enough material to do it this way. I'm going to have 2 spare tiles after I finish the sides with this, and then no spare tiles after I finish doing this. So I better not mess up. Before I proceeded to tile, I completed the flooring that surrounds the stairway. The area to the right of the stairwell used to have a big heat exchanger, which I've removed a long time ago. This area is going to be a shoe rack, as you can tell by the bunch of shoes that are stuffed into the corner there. So I extended the flooring into this area as well. When making my cuts around the edges of the stairwell, I made sure to account for the thickness of the tile. Before I can start tiling though, I need to kind of plan out my layup, and I'm going to measure and mark all my cuts because I need to rent a tile cutter and that costs money per hour. I have a little grid marked here and I'm gonna do it like kind of like this. This will be a full piece, full piece, full piece, and then I'm gonna cut all the others to have this nice little grid. The cuts kind of go into the steps. On this side I've already planned my layup and I've numbered each square, and I have marked all of my cuts I need to make and I've numbered them so that I know where each piece goes in the layup. So that's nice and prepped.
And I've rented a tile cutter. I only have it for 4 hours, so let's get cutting. Okay, I got them all cut. I actually didn't have enough of these Kit Kat ones, so I had to do some silly things. I've used almost every single piece of scrap that I have. So I had enough for the top 2 rows, and on the bottom, I only had enough. I was short like 4 of them. There'll be a weird line, like there'll be an extra line in the design, which is unavoidable because I'm using scraps. Yeah, it took me an extra hour or so to just figure that out. And I don't think I have it completely figured out because I can't even describe what I did.
To tie in the exposed edges of the tile, I used some matte black aluminum tile edging. This gives the exposed edge of the tile a nice finished look. Then I mixed up some mortar. I had a bit left over from when I tiled the bathroom. The stairwell is quite small, so it doesn't take much mortar to get the job done. Finally, I started laying up tile. I used 1/8 spacers between the large format tiles and 16th inch spacers on the skinny tiles. Before applying the mortar, I wetted down the plywood, and as I was going, I kept wetting down that plywood. Apparently this helps with adhesion of the mortar so that it dries evenly throughout. So that's what I'm doing. So it's another day. I completed all of what I thought were all my cuts. So I'm nice and prepped. And then I, last night, started to lay up my pieces and then discovered that I was missing number 3. And I've already returned the cutter. So I guess I'm cutting it by hand with a grinder. All right, the sides are done. Now it's time to do the back with the little guys. So I've made a middle mark. So I'm gonna start in the middle and work my way out. And then I'll have to trim the pieces on the sides with the grinder because I don't have a cutter anymore. So here we go. Next is the skinny tile. These went on surprisingly smoothly. When I laid these up, I left a large enough gap below them for the flooring to squeeze underneath. When everything's put together, this will create a much cleaner look. For the ends, I tried cutting little pieces to fill the gaps, but they kept breaking. I ended up getting frustrated and I just filled the gaps with a bunch of grout. If I had enough spare tile, I would have kept trying, but I ran out. Now to finish off the steps, I bought some of this stair nosing, nice aluminum stair nosing, which will finish off the edges. And I'm also going to use it around the top, but I need to make some complicated cuts. I was going to use an angle grinder to make most of my cuts, which is okay for the flat ones. I want to do like 45-degree angle cuts so that the corners mesh in together nice. And I don't have a metal drop saw. My neighbor Randy does have a metal drop saw, but it doesn't angle. It can only do straight cuts. So what I've done is I've taken a metal cutting wheel and I put it on my saw. They do make metal cutting wheels for these saws with teeth on them, but they're $100. This was $10. I only have to do like 4 cuts, so hopefully it doesn't explode on me. I found it quite difficult to make precision cuts using the miter saw this way. My saw doesn't have a clamp to hold down the workpiece, so the saw would move the aluminum slowly as it cut. The cuts came out rough and they needed to be cleaned up. This is obviously quite dangerous, so please, don't try this yourself. And there we have it. The stairway is complete. It only took me all summer. Now, when people walk up to my stairwell, they don't ask, is that safe to step on? It looks so much better. It's a much better intro to the inside of the bus. A couple things to note about the stairwell. I didn't do the bottom step. The bottom step is much smaller than the other steps. That is because when I added 1.5 inches of insulation on the first step, that was carried over and lost on the bottom step. So I've kept the bottom step grip tape
so that there's the most traction possible so people don't slip. It does make it a little ugly, and I did leave a gap underneath the tile so I could put a piece of flooring on that step and then cap it off with some more corner nosing. But for now, I'm gonna keep it as grip tape to see how that goes. I don't know about insulating properties yet and if this is gonna help much with the thermals in the wintertime, but I have noticed a significant increase in sound deadening inside the bus. It used to be extremely loud when driving this bus, and now that this is insulated, the engine noises have been reduced significantly, which is very nice for driving comfort. Another added benefit to this insulation job is it made the stairwell a little smaller, which is good on the build side because now you have 1.5 inches of extra space to work with in the living part of the build. The stairwell doesn't need to be this big. On the sides, I could have went up to like 3 inches of insulation if I could, just to add that thickness. I don't need such a wide stairwell. It's really a useless space. So thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the build. I hope this helps someone out there, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.